getting to just reflect on the realities of life, realities that may not be told elsewhere, realities that perhaps people are afraid talking about. And that is how the family show came about. And this is the first session of the family show. This is the first of the very many other sessions that are lined up. I have reached out to very many other coaches in very many other areas that are affecting people. And all of them are excited to be joining us in the coming Mondays so that we can be able to talk about realities of things that are facing the truths about COVID-19. So we have so many shows lined up, and we'll be trying to look at everything that is affecting the family unit. We'll be looking at matters of stress, depression, matters of parenting, matters of money, matters of marriage, matters of so many things that affect people and which in turn affect the family. My strongest belief is that when a person is affected, the family is affected. And when the family is affected, the people in that family are also affected. The aim of the family show is to inspire people. It is then to equip people with the how of going around certain realities. And then the end result then is to transform people and by extension, transform families. So ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, welcome to today's session. In today's class, we're beginning to reflect on how to bounce back from financial strain. It is not a hidden secret that so many people have been hit in different ways. But one of the most prominent ways that people have been hit in this season is the financial way. The financial aspect of many people has been affected. So many people have lost jobs, for instance. By now, you definitely know someone who has lost a job, if it's not you. By now, you know someone who has gone through a pay cut, if it's not you. By now, you know a business whose performance has dwindled, is not the way it was in the past, if not yours. By now, you know a business that has collapsed, if it's not yours. So by now, we know those realities. Just like when COVID started, very many people were skeptical of the reality of its existence. And you would remember people asking, do you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who has corona? Today, we can't afford to ask that question because now we can feel the reality. So in the same manner, then the effects of the same have also been felt with us. And financially, very many of us have been affected, right? Other people have been affected financially because of sickness. Sickness perhaps directly from COVID-19, and sickness perhaps from other ailments. You know, when sickness hits, then it has potential to drain finances. And when finances are drained, then we get into that strain. We feel strained, we feel pushed to the wall, right? Other people have been strained as a result of death. Maybe they have experienced death in their families. And when your loved ones are ailing and you're working very hard to sort out the bills, and eventually they get to leave you, the moment of grief pushes you to the corner. Then the reality that the sickness has actually drained the family of finances is also staring at you. Then you begin to face that particular strain. And therefore, we're beginning to reflect on this reality because it has affected very many people. The big question in the minds of very many people is that, is there a way out? Is there hope? Because then at a time like this, many people are beginning to give up. Many people are beginning to contemplate suicide. So many others have actually successfully done it. Very many people are beginning to doubt whether God exists. Very many people are beginning to be skeptical about life. Very many people have actually resigned from life. They're just living because they woke up and found themselves breathing. And that is a state that you and I need to begin thinking about in terms of what it is that we can do. This conversation is huge. It's a conversation that by no means can be exhausted in one session like this. But I intend to achieve the three objectives that I've mentioned in the next few minutes by beginning to share with you a few things that I believe that if we took into consideration, then they will help us to begin to approach the reality of financial strain in a different way, and then most probably begin to scale the heights back to normalcy, and then even further upwards. So welcome aboard, and I want to use the next few minutes to share with you about 9 ways through which you can begin to bounce back from financial strain. So my assumption is that you have either experienced financial strain in this season, or you know someone who has experienced financial strain, and therefore whatever it is that you will grasp from this session, you will be able perhaps to share with them even as you use it for your own good, right? So permit me to get into the 9 things that I want to share with us tonight very quickly. This show will always be a 1-hour show, because people need to do other things after this. And therefore, I want to promise to be a good steward of your time, even as we try to learn as much as possible. So when you find yourself pushed to the corner financially, just like you may be feeling today, the first thing that you need to do is to accept your reality. And when I say you accept your reality, I do not mean that you need to resign and be comfortable with the fact that things are no longer working, and therefore you fold your arms and say, Mimi nimekubali. I'm not saying you resign. I'm saying you acknowledge that what has happened is part of life. Sorry for that. We will proceed. I think if it persists, then we will create a different link. So that then we can proceed and complete whatever it is that we are here to do. The agenda has to be fulfilled one way or the other. So I was mentioning about 9 things that you need to do when you realize that you have been pushed down, you have been taken down the strain path financially. And the first thing that I mentioned is that you need to accept your current realities. By acceptance, I said I do not mean that you need to resign and say, this thing has happened, nimekubali, and you just sit down and surrender. Acceptance here does not mean surrender. Acceptance here begins to mean that you acknowledge that what has happened is part of life and part of life's storms. We all are aware that in this life that we live, storms will many times become part of us. And therefore, there is nothing good in a storm, that we all know. But one beautiful thing I love about storms is that storms do end. And the truth is that whatever it is that you are going through today, whatever strain that you begin to feel today because of what the current realities have done to you, the truth is that they too have an end. They do end, and they will end. They're just storms of life. And so we are here to begin to see what is it that can begin to lessen the pain? What is it that can begin to quicken the process of beginning to ensure that we begin to bounce back? So it's important that you begin to accept what has happened. It's important that then you begin to also accept that you have the responsibility to turn around whatever it is that you are going through. It will take your effort. It will not take any other person. Don't sit down and wait for a different person to come and lift you up. Do not wait for any other human being to come and understand your problem and begin to lift you up. There is something that you need to do, and you have to accept that you have what it takes to begin to take the journey upwards. And that is where the conversation begins to happen from. It is also very important at that particular point to accept that the time to begin the change is now, so that then you are not also pushing forward and waiting for an opportune time, waiting for times when things perhaps will be different, when someone else will have worked on things for them to be different from what they are today. The best time to begin to do something on your circumstances is today, right? And it's also important for you to accept that it is not going to be overnight. It may not be overnight. For some people, it might be overnight, but those are very few people. For the average person, it will not be overnight. So it's going to be a process, and therefore we have then to be ready to handle ourselves through the process, even as we remain hopeful that things are going to change, so that then we can begin to bounce back into to where we were and where perhaps we were expecting to be before these things began to happen. Number 2 thing that you need to do is you need to take stock. take stock of where you are. Look around yourself and begin to define where you are standing. Where are you now? On which grounds are you standing? Begin to look around and define where you're standing financially, for example, right? Look at your money story. Where are you? So begin to look at your income. How much income do you now have, right? Define that, put a value to it. Tell yourself, I used to have income X, now I have income Y. So answer yourself the question, how much income do I have now? Define your expenditure. What is it that is looking at you in the name of expenditure, in the name of bills? What is it that that you need to be spending your money on in this season? So do a list of your expected expenditure a time like this. Then another reality that you also need to take stock of is your debt situation. If you had borrowed money from people, from organizations, take stock. Write down a list of everyone you owe. Write down a list of all bills that are overdue, because overdue bills then begin to become debt, right? So do a listing of everyone you owe. The beauty of beginning to take stock of where you are is that then you begin to see where you need to start the conversation from. You begin to define where you need to start from, and you begin to have a picture of perhaps what it would take for you to begin to fly from where you are to the next level. So that would be the second step that you need to take yourself through. Take stock of where you're standing financially. Take stock of where you're standing emotionally. Ask yourself, how are you feeling about this whole thing? Maybe you lost your job. How are you currently feeling about it? Are you still feeling bitter? Are you still feeling bad about it? Have your feelings changed since the time the communication was made to you? Or are you still standing in the same ground you were some time back, right? So define the grounds you're standing on emotionally. Ask yourself exactly how you feel about the reality that is facing you. Now, once you define all these things, then you begin to have a mind that is getting ready for some journey, a mind that is getting ready to begin to make a difference within your life. Because then you cannot improve your financial story if you do not know what your current figures are, right? Then number 3, then you need not to be too hard on yourself. Now, this is what I have realized a lot of people are beginning to do to themselves. Very many people are beginning to judge themselves so harshly. Many people are beginning to pinch themselves so hard. Many people are beginning to blame themselves for what befell them. Many people begin to say that it was their fault that they lost their job. I met several people who were asking, how come I was the one who lost the job and not the others? How come the others remained, right? So even if you exited perhaps because of your performance level or because of a reason that had your contribution to it, it is not fair on yourself to begin being very hard on yourself. So at this particular time, you need to release yourself. You need to forgive yourself. You need to assure yourself that these are circumstances, and you need to separate the circumstances from the person that is you. The circumstances are bad, but the person is not bad. It's just that you're surrounded by those circumstances. So begin to draw a line between your person and the circumstances, right? So remember to be fair to yourself, because you need to release yourself so that then you can begin to accommodate any ideas that can begin to take you from where you are standing to a better position, right? So do not be very hard on yourself. It is not your fault a lot of times that you went through what you went through. If your income has reduced, it is not your fault. Perhaps it was your company beginning to reorganize itself to respond to business realities. Perhaps you will even agree that business where you work had actually come down, and therefore a corporate decision was made that a few members of staff will be relieved of their duties. So then it does not become your fault that that happened to you, right? So remember that there is still life ahead of you. And then if you want to blame yourself for what happened, then you're beginning to stifle your chances. You're beginning to cap your chances of jumping higher than you could, right? Then another challenge that I've seen on this particular point is also people beginning to look at their age, right? I've also had a good number of people call and say, you see, I am old, you see, I'm nearing retirement, and now I've been hit by this. When will I ever recover? And things like those. You see, life is funny. Life does not have a script. If life had a script, then we'll be talking about different things. Today, we'll just go to the manual and check out what will happen to us tomorrow. Life doesn't have a script, and things can happen at any point in life. You've heard of very many people who hit their fortunes when they were very much older. Colonel Sanders and very many others. Just 2 weeks ago, I encountered an old man who was confessing that now is when he is living the life he hoped, he wished that he lived all through his years. He worked until retirement and nothing would happen. But after retirement, an idea came to his mind and he tried the idea and the idea blossomed. Today, he is earning money more than he has ever earned. And today he's beginning to live life that he never thought he would live. So do not put limits on yourself in the name of age. A time like this, when you've been pushed to the corner financially, truth is that age, much as it has a big bearing on the number of things we can do, it has not closed anyone in a box of possibilities or impossibilities. Age does not put you somewhere and condemn you and tell you because you are this age, then you cannot achieve this or the other thing. With a lot of humility, I've sat down with people who were elderly, people who had given up in life, people who came complaining that they cannot recover. And by the grace of God, I can report without fear of contradiction that I have witnessed people who thought that time was out for them begin to recover and begin to do wonderful things financially and even in other areas of life. So I'm not telling you theory, I'm telling you things that I know, things that I have witnessed, and things that perhaps if you opened your mind properly and looked around, you will see one or two people who picked up their pieces and things began to happen to them even later on in life. So do not concentrate on your age at a time like this, beginning to confine yourself to a certain corner by the number that you call your age. For today, allow that age to remain a number. And let's just agree that age is just a number in matters like this. The truth is that you can bounce back, and you will bounce back, and you should bounce back as long as you begin to believe in yourself, as long as you begin to make effort towards the bouncing back process. So do not condemn yourself because of your age. Number 4, you need to draw a new budget. Right? There is a way you've been spending money. Maybe you are spending money even without thinking, even without a plan, even without sitting down to consider several other factors. You are just receiving money and spending money. Now a time has come that is unusual, right? These are what would be called desperate moments that call for desperate solutions. These are unusual moments that would call for unusual solutions. Whereas a budget is supposed to be part of our life, we also agree with the reality that majority of the people who spend money do not spend money according to any plan, all right? And the time has come then that you need to sit down and begin to draw a new budget. Begin to ask yourself, I used to spend my money this way, and that is why I say that you need to take stock. So once you have taken stock of how you spend your money, then now you begin to look at the reality with you. You begin to see that you used to spend this money when your income was 50,000. Today, that income has been reduced to 30,000, all right? And therefore, the truth is that if you continue spending money the way you were spending when you were earning 50,000, then you might not be able to go far. You might find yourself beginning to borrow for consumption. And you see, debt is also another way that that makes incomes begin to be small, right? So there is someone who still has their full income today, did not go through a pay cut, did not lose their jobs. They have their full income on paper, but their actual income, their disposable income is not there, is reduced because of getting trapped in debt, right? And therefore, it is important that therefore you have to sit down and draw a new budget that reflects your current realities, Okay, this is that time when our forefathers would remind us of beginning to belt up. All right, I met a group some time back, I think two weeks ago, who were saying they never thought they would encounter the reality of kufunga mshipi. You used to hear our parents talk about kufunga mshipi, and the time has come that they also face the reality of kufunga mshipi, right? So moments do come in life when then you have to sit down and face certain realities and be able to scale down certain things. You look at the way you used to spend your money and you realize certain things in that budget need perhaps to stop, right? You might also discover that maybe other things need to reduce. The quantities that you were spending money on back then when things were normal might not be the same quantities that you'll spend with the reduced amount of money. Okay, so you might need to go slow on certain things, especially luxuries, and you might need to therefore just come up with a new budget. Now, when push comes to shove, you might need to switch to what we call a bare bones budget. Now, a bare bones budget is a basics budget that is supposed to help you survive the storm, okay? So that then you can be alive the other side of life when the storm has cleared, to recollect yourself and begin to run with life the way you used to. So if you look at your current income and you realize that this income is not big enough even to support the necessities the way they used to be back in the day, then you might switch to what I'm calling the bare bones budget, where you are stripping yourself of a lot of flesh and beginning to realize that I'm going through a phase that requires me to survive on the bones, or some meat that is closer to the bones, okay, for a while, because it's important for you to also understand the nature of the challenge that you are facing today. And having defined it as a temporary challenge, then it is important that then you psych yourself up and begin to just know that this is going to be a temporary phase. So no harm. Time comes when you have to forget about what the world will feel, what your neighbors will say when they visit my house and find me living this way and find me having scaled life down to this particular level. What will they say? A time comes when you have to shed off what society will say and begin to face your realities. The truth is, many of us have struggled to do things for the sake of others. But when we burn our fingers, the others are never there to share in our agony, right? So you have to be keen, and you have to realize that the time comes when it is you versus life and your God, okay? And that time is a time like this, okay? And then as you look at this budget, depending on how your income has been reduced, it could be the time for you to begin to look at your emergency kitty if you had one. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I've also encountered a few cases where people had saved for a rainy day, but now they are finding it very difficult to take advantage of the emergency kitty. A time like this, their income has come down, maybe they have lost their jobs, but they are finding it very difficult to put their hand in that kitty. They are wondering whether if they started putting their hand in that kitty, whether things will, how long that will take them. But the question here is, why were you starting that kitty? All right, if you are starting that kitty so that it can help you when things get thick, maybe you need to sit down and define whether things have gotten as thick as you anticipated when you began to put aside some money. I have met a case where people prefer to borrow, instead of using the money that they had. Now they are borrowing from dangerous sources, and they're borrowing for consumption. So you had money that you had saved for this particular purpose. The purpose has happened, but you're finding it a bit difficult, maybe because of something that we need to talk about in the days to come, perhaps because of your money personality. You find it very difficult to be able to utilize that money. You would rather borrow at heavy interest to spend instead of consulting that kitty temporarily, because that is the reason why you set aside that particular kitty. Okay, it's also time that you might need to look at your possessions and see whether you have some possessions that you might need to release. Okay, It is not strange that I've also encountered cases where people were going through a lot of difficulties, and they were actually sinking very deep in debt. And I remember uh, meeting people who would be driving three vehicles, a family, a small family, having three vehicles. They're going through difficulties, they're sinking in debt, but they're holding on to their vehicles very strongly. And my work as I consult one-on-one with such cases is not to tell you to sell your vehicle. It's just to try and open the world for you so that you can begin to see, to make the choice for yourself. And surprisingly, when we met for a review after a while, um, my prayer was that they would just release one vehicle. One vehicle was enough to begin to bring them to sanity. And when we met, they had seen some bigger light, and they actually opted to remain with one car. What was interesting with them is that they actually used to work on the same stretch of the road. For instance, if they are living along Thika Road, for example, you'll find that maybe one lives at one works at Utali, and another one works at Mudaiga. So they can easily, and their times were compatible. They could easily just use one car, drop one person, and then the other one goes with the car. But then they would seriously hold on to the three cars. And the reason for the three cars, according to them, was so that they can be exchanging. So one uses car number one on Monday, another one uses it a different car on Monday, then on Wednesday they can exchange, then over the weekend they use the other one, right? For a show. Later on, they would admit that all this they were doing because of other people, to make a statement. And times come when statements begin to burn your fingers. So we have to be real and true to ourselves, and begin to make unpopular decisions, begin to realize that the time has come that if we continue doing things to please others, doing things to make statements, then we might burn our fingers even harder. Then we might actually even sabotage our chances of bouncing back from the current financial strains that we are facing. So it's high time that then I introduce you to yourself, right? That then you begin to be true to the person that is you and the circumstances that are surrounding that particular person, right? Then number 5, I will suggest that you also embrace asking for help. Okay, very many of us, when things are thick, we want to try and fight even harder. And men are big culprits when it comes to wanting to try and fight and fight. I understand that it is inherent in us to try and fight and try and be the men that we are supposed to be. But the truth is that a time does come in life when we have to embrace asking for help. What kind of help am I talking about here? There are different things that you may want to seek help in a time like this when you're faced with financial strain, right? You might need to ask for professional help, okay? Maybe because of your financial pressure, you realize that you have been stressed, you have sunk into depression, you might need professional help from counselors and psychiatrists to be able to help you manage your mental and emotional state, and so that then once you gain that well-being, you can begin to concentrate on even working on your finances. Because if your state of mind has been affected, if you've been affected emotionally, then it might not even be easy for you to begin working on your finances because you have lost the person that is you. So embrace asking for professional help where it is due. Okay, you may also be able to ask for financial help. Yes, I said financial help. Now, financial help would come in various forms and for various reasons. You could ask for financial help for upkeep, right? And this is where the conversation of your support system begins to come in. Okay, how does your support system look like? Who surrounds you? Who are the people around you? Right? How has your relationship with other people been in the past? Do you have a system that can support you? Do you have someone you can run to when you don't have a packet of unga for your family? Right? And to this extent, I'm also beginning to address all of us that perhaps may not be having a supportive system around us, to begin thinking about it. I'm not suggesting that you begin to depend on people, but I'm saying that you need to surround yourself with a system that you can rely on, a system that can hold you, that can lift you, right? Because God uses people to bless us a lot of times, and many times it's because we don't even ask for the help. In this particular season, I have encountered very many churches that have offered help, but I've also met people who feel ashamed to even go for the help. I have worked closely with churches in terms of streamlining the kind of help for their congregants. And we've also faced the challenge of people facing the problem, but refusing to accept that they are facing a problem and therefore refusing to even go for the help, right? And therefore the church keeps announcing that we have foodstuffs here. Anyone who feels like they can come for them, please do come, right? A time comes when you get to that point and normalize asking for such help. You could also ask for look for financial help in form of capital, so that then perhaps you want to start a small business so that you can begin to earn money. Okay, so maybe you have this brilliant idea that will bring in a few coins here and there, but you don't have the money because you've been strained financially. Okay, then you need to look at your surrounding, you need to look at your network and begin to see who it is that you can approach that can be beneficial to you in terms of helping you with a little capital so that you can begin to make some money. And in the classes ahead, we have a class about making money, we have a class about starting a business, and hopefully in those classes, we will be able to share more details on how you can be able to start even smaller businesses that can begin to cushion you, that can begin to even assure you of a meal. Because a time comes when you begin to focus on the basics, even as you continue hoping for a full bounce back. Okay, so we begin bouncing from the basics. So normalize asking for help. You could also ask for spousal help, rather help from your spouse if the two of you have not been working together your finances. Maybe every one of you has been doing their finances their own way, okay? And so no one knows what is happening on the other end. I remember last year when the realities of COVID had just started, I got a chance to prepare some employees of a certain company who were facing a pay cut. No, these ones were actually facing a sack. And after the session, I remember meeting one of them who actually acknowledged that he had actually planned that he was not going to say that he had lost his job. He was just going to find a way of surviving. And these are things I hear from so many people. Many people confess that when they lost their jobs, they would leave their house and go and sit at Jivanji because they don't want to open up to their spouses. So what you're doing here is that you're maintaining the expectations of your family at where they were before things got bad. And therefore we will forgive them when they keep pushing you, when they keep telling you unga is finished, when they keep telling you that this or the other item is not there in the house, because you've not brought them up to speed with what is happening to you, right? 2 weeks ago when I was having a conversation called financial parenting, I was talking about the need for us to communicate with our children, and especially times of lack. We have to find a way of bringing the reality to the family in a way that will not scare your children, in a way that will not make them feel insecure, right? So some wisdom needs to come in here. But even before the children, our spouses, maybe in this season, one of you is still earning. So if you've been working out your finances separately, a time comes when then you have to open up and say, look, I've lost my job. Look, my income has reduced, so that then you can begin to work together. There has never been a time where working together has made a lot of sense for couples like this season, okay? Because then when one loses income and both of you are getting income, the family will be strained if you continue operating at the same level where you are operating. But the beauty of beginning to open up is because then you can make adjustments. You can begin to sit down and say, look, we used to have this particular income. Now it has shrunk to this level. So what do we adjust so that things can begin to move for us, right? Now, I've talked about asking for help. Let me also address those of us who people will come to for help, because that's a whole different group. If we address one side, then there might be an imbalance. Please, in this season, I beseech you, if a friend, if a colleague calls you and seeks for help of whatever nature, if you are in a position to help, please help. It is Dalai Lama who says that our prime interest, our prime purpose in this life is to help one another. But he proceeds and says that if you cannot help them, at least do not hurt them. Do not be this person who, when someone comes to seek for help from you, you're the one who begins to broadcast, to tell everyone how so-and-so was not properly organized, how so-and-so has become a beggar in the streets, how so-and-so is becoming a bother to everyone. If you are not able to help, please communicate your inability to help respectfully. But don't be the one who is adding pain. Maybe they are genuinely looking for your help. But if you are able to, please help. Please encourage them. Please pray with them. Pray for them. If you can help them financially, please do. It will go a very long way. You don't want to imagine. Right? So it is important that while we talk about this other phase of asking for help, it's also important that we turn the coin and also talk about this other phase of those that will be approached for help. Okay, that was a passionate appeal because I have also come to know what that would do to people. When someone is in need and then they realize the people they approached for help are the people who've actually made the situation even worse, right? Now, the last thing I want to mention on that point is that do not allow pride to come in between you and the help that you might get. Right? There are people who begin to feel I am too big to seek for this kind of help. I am too big to speak out my problem. And that's how those problems begin to compound in us. And the day they erupt, we begin to see people doing very nasty things. We begin wondering what came over them. People who used to be very sober, people who used to look very normal, they get to a point where they begin to do things that we cannot even comprehend, right? So a time comes when you have to forget about everything else and just normalize seeking for help where help is due to be sought. Number 6, you need to give attention to your debt. Okay, if you had borrowed from people, if you had borrowed from banks, from other institutions, and you are paying well before things became worse, all right, when things have happened the way they have happened, you now feel pushed to the corner. Please do not neglect your debt. What do I mean by do not neglect your debt? Of course, if you do not have money, you know, debt is paid using money. Na dawa ya deni ni kulipa. But there are times when you cannot pay, and the average person wants to run away from their lenders during such a time. The psychology of lending is such that every lender wants to know that you have their interest at heart. The best way to demonstrate that is when you reach out, all right? So when you find yourself cornered, please lift your hand, reach out to your lenders, explain what is happening. The lender will sit knowing that at least you had their interest at heart. Do not wait for them to look for you. In the event that they look for you before you look for them, please do not go into hiding. Please do not begin using excuse messages. I am in church, call you back. And that time it's in the middle of the night. And the lender is left wondering, when will you they stay in the church, or what is it that they do? Or you, and then you forget that you said you'll call them back. Some called you and you said in church, we'll call you back. And then 2 weeks down the line, you haven't called back. They are wondering whether you became the benches of the church or what exactly is it that you're still doing in church 2 weeks down the line, right? So reach out to your lenders, explain to them what is happening. As you reach out to them, begin to also try to renegotiate the terms of your debt. Maybe your income has reduced in power, or even reduced literally, right? Maybe you are paying a certain debt 10,000 per month. Now if you look at your mathematics, you can only perhaps be able to pay 4,000. Reach out to them and explain and tell them, this is what I'm able to get. And you'll be so shocked that many of them will embrace, will accept, will acknowledge that particular gesture. And even if you have been stripped of income completely, The mere act of communicating and telling your lender, this is the reality that has happened. Unfortunately, I may not be able to continue servicing the debt today, but I'm trying to work things out. And once the situation begins to change, we will also come back, sit down, and begin to work out how I can resume repayment. So give attention to your debt, right? I don't want to go into the whole conversation of debt management. That's a big conversation. Those of you that follow the things I do, you realize that is a very huge conversation. We cannot even begin to talk about it now, but give attention to your debt. And even as you seek for the help that we said, if you realize you also need to have an expert look at your debt situation, raise your hand. We can always plan a way and then begin to look at what is happening in your finances, in your debt situation, and begin to think about possible solutions. So do not run away from your lenders. In this season, partner with your lenders, right? Sit down and reason with them. That will do you a lot of good. It will help you from a lot of pressure, because every lender is a pressure point. The more lenders you have, the more pressure points you have. If they decide to raid you in one day, the higher your chances of losing it. So reach out to them before they escalate pressure on you. Number 7, think income, right? You have lost income, or your income has lost power. Don't just sit down and give up. Begin to ask yourself, what is it that you can do to get another coin? Is it possible that there is something else you can do? And the answer that is resounding is yes. All of us, many times, we have certain things we can do, okay, to make an extra coin. There's always that thing you can do. If you sat down and focused your mind on the question of whether there is something you can do to better your income situation, you will realize that there are very many things you can begin to do. Look at your giftings, for example. Do you have a talent that you have not used in the past? Were you good in art and craft in the past? Were you good at making bangles, at making certain things? Is it possible that you can begin to see whether you can begin to make them, and then use social media to advertise and see whether you can get people beginning to buy? Is it possible that you are good in cooking? Is it possible you can begin to make cakes for people? Is it possible you can begin to make samosas for people, right? These simple things can go a very long way. Not very long ago, we had this conversation with someone, and recently they confirmed that they started their samosa business, and now they're getting a net income of 20,000. This was money that they did not have. And they started by cooking samosas, and they started by selling where they were living in their flat. Then they realized people were loving it. Then they tried to reach out to their networks here and there, and they started delivering to different places. When we spoke, they were beginning to net 20,000 per month, money that was never there. So they had a choice of sitting down and saying they lost their job, but they chose to do something, to think about something that can be done, right? Is it possible that if you're a teacher, you can find children that need tuition, private tuition, right? We know that organized private tuition in schools has not been happening, but we also know that there are parents who want their children to be coached privately, very many of them. Again, I shared this in a particular session somewhere, and after a while, a teacher called and said now they no longer have the pressure they used to have financially, because they were able to find some parents who signed them for a long term until their children will do exams. And that was closer to a 1-year contract. What I'm trying to say is that we need to open our thinking and begin to ask ourselves whether there is something we can do. A lot of times, pride begins to affect us. Many of us begin to feel proud, begin to feel that there are certain things that we cannot do, right? Many of us begin to think that we are too big than certain things, right? We are so mature for trying out certain things, okay? And so we sit with potential, yet we are reeling from the pain of the reality that is surrounding us. So begin to think income. Is there a business you can begin? Many times, many of us rush into thinking about capital before we even define the idea that we want to operationalize. And that begins to cripple us, because if you realize the capital you want is money that you can't see, that you don't have, then you cannot even think about the idea. Businesses do not start from capital, they begin from ideas. It is very easy for you to walk around with your idea and say, I'm looking for X amount of money because I have this idea that is an idea that can work. Right? Every time I speak to parents in schools, I like telling them that it is very easy when your child has performed, right? Because there are those parents who like telling their children that there is no hope, even if you passed your exams, we don't have school fees for further education. And I tell them, do you know it is very easy that if that child passes, it is very easy for you to walk with a certificate in these offices or approach people and tell them, look, this is what my son, my daughter did, but I don't have money to take them to school for further education. But what if then you don't encourage them to perform well, and then they do not perform well, not because they didn't have potential, they had it, but because you kept speaking hopelessness, they were not able to stretch themselves. It is very difficult for you to say that I'm looking for an opportunity for my son or daughter, right? So if you have an idea that is powerful, it is very easy for you to tell someone, look, I'm just looking for 2,000 shillings to start something, right? So begin from looking at the ideas that you can actually begin to operationalize. And I have to remind you that you have to be ready to begin small. Okay, because I've also met people who've told me, you see, I was earning an income X, so I'm looking for a job that will give me an income of that amount or higher. Yet we are also living in the reality where maybe many employers in your line are also beginning to give pay cuts, are also beginning to lay off employees. So if you find an opportunity that is paying you something, maybe not the same as what you used to earn before turmoil came in, please, a time comes when you have to say, let me survive first. Once the storm is over, I can reorganize myself. I'm also beginning to say that if you lost your job, it is high time that you begin searching for another one, right? I know that not all of us can begin to think business, but have you started applying for jobs, or are you waiting for COVID to end? When will it end? It is very true that while things are difficult today, the truth is that there are very many people also getting employed in this season. Have you started applying for those jobs? Get serious and begin to think income, right? Because those financial obligations that you have will need to be sorted by income. If you sit and just wait for some miracle to happen, the sitting might be long. Okay? So it's necessary that you begin to do something towards ensuring that you begin to have a coin coming your direction. Okay? Talk to people to see whether there is an opportunity. Jitume. Okay? Have this inner drive to see things change. Have this inner drive to see things begin to happen for your family financially. Have this inner drive to see yourself begin to make a coin. It is better than nothing. It's better than depending on people. It is better than the pressure and the shame that you think it comes with. So wake up in the morning and just try to find out whether there are opportunities that you can begin to capitalize on, right? I can see a few people saying a few things in the chat. Juliet is asking, what can we do to be part of this program? All right, maybe I will not respond now. We are putting together maybe some response. So towards the end, I will tell you how you can partner with us in making the family show a big success in the days to come. So you can send your questions in the chat, or your comments in the chat as we edge towards the finish line. I'm remaining with 2 points, and the 8th point that I want to say is that you need to find an accountability partner. As you begin to think about bouncing back, as you begin to think about looking for a job, begin to think about finding income. it is very important that you begin to find someone that can help you in this journey, someone that can encourage you, someone that you can be accountable to. This person could be your spouse, this person could be your friend, this person could be your coach. This person needs to be someone who can believe in you, who can believe in your dreams, someone who can encourage you, someone who can have your best interests at heart. You have to be careful as you select someone that you will share whatever plans that you have with, because there are those that you will share with and they begin to also broadcast your shortcomings to the world. So you have to be very careful who you pick and to what extent do you begin to open up to them in terms of the plans that you have. But just try and see that you can have someone who can be pushing you, someone you can be reporting and saying this is the progress, someone who can be calling you and asking you, hey, you said that you are making a job applications, how many have you made in this particular week? All right, because a lot of times when we are left on our own, we begin to relax, we begin to have the feeling that no one is chasing after us, no one is pushing us. But when you know that there's someone who will make a call, okay, you begin to want to do the right thing, you begin to want to stretch yourself, to want to push yourself into doing what you need to do, right? And then lastly, number 9, you need to connect with your God. It is only your God who understands properly what you are going through. It is only your God who knows the pains that you have gone through in this season. It is only Him who knows what the journey has been like to you. You may narrate it to the rest of us. We may not see it through your eyes. We will see it through our own eyes as human beings. Many of us will judge you. Many of us will refuse to believe in what you will be saying as your story. But when you take it to your God, then He is the one who has promised you prosperity. He's the one who has promised you abundance. He's the one who has promised that things would happen. You need to take it to Him. You need to let Him then give you the grace, the energy to go through this difficult phase. The rest of us can only encourage you. The rest of us can only help you to the extent to which we are able, right? But then He needs to give you grace. He needs to give you strength. Right? In this season, the people you owe money can call you names. You need grace so that you can begin not to pick fights with them. Right? It's only Him who can begin to bless the work of your hands. So you have then to reconnect with Him. You have to check how your relationship with Him has been. A time comes when you realize perhaps there is no one who can hear you out. There is no one who can listen to you. And that is the point where many people begin to give up. And we forget that there is a supreme being we can take our cries to, we can take our concerns to, and He will listen to us, right? And He will understand us. And you will be much better because you opened up, because you shared with Him, because you cried out to Him. It is very important that you reconnect with your Maker. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many things I would have loved to say. I promised you that I would take an hour, and despite the disruptions that we had, which I'm deeply sorry for, I thank God that I've been